because I mean, that's the one thing that I saw about comic store owners back then, is that not only were they not female, which understandable, it was like 95% male clientele at the time, but they didn't know a lot about business.
Hi, my name is
Hi.
Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where we talk to the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry, the people who make the comics industry go round, the people who have built the structure upon which we all build our careers. And we try and get to know them. We get to know how they built their lives, how they built their businesses, and see what we can learn from them. My guests this week are, they might be the people who have been talked about the most on this show that have not yet been on the show, except maybe Phil Boyle. I haven't talked to Phil yet, and he keeps coming up. So, Phil, I've got you on my sights. All right. Cecilia and Jeremy Shorr. There's something of comics royalty. Hi. They have built a life and a culture and a community around their love of comics and of each other and of their family. You really cannot be involved in comics in anywhere in the Texas area without knowing who they are. You cannot listen to a comics podcast like this one without hearing stories about people whose careers began working for one of the or both of these people. So it is my utmost pleasure to welcome them to the show, Jeremy and Cecilia Shorr. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
No problem.
You're welcome.
So is this a back room? Are we at home? Where are we today?
The office at home.
Okay.
It's not.
We
could have had a prettier background, I guess.
Since the start time was right at the store's close time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interfere with any of that, so we did it here.
That is I totally understand that, and I'm so glad to have you in any way we can. All right. I always try and start these conversations off with a story, and I will tell you, I really enjoyed spending the last couple of days really digging deep into your lives. And so there is a story about the two of you and how you finally began dating after apparently knowing each other for a while. And while I do want you to tell that story, I want you to know that, Jeremy, there are two different versions of this story out there. Yes. One where she asks you out and one where you ask her out. So I want to get this on the record. I want to get this on the record now.
He asked.
Oh, all right. Yep. You guys tell me. Let's hear the story officially, though.
Okay. So I'll boil it down as much as I can. Houston is a big place. Mm-hmm. I lived in Clear Lake City, which is in the southeast side of town.
Wasn't Houston back then?
No, it was a different town. And I had a date up in. Then I was picking her up in the northwest quadrant, which from my house was an hour.
What was her name?
In Houston, that's nothing. An hour in Houston is nothing. Okay,
that's how you get to the Walmart.
It's 30 minutes to go anywhere. I mean, the close places.
Yes,
that's Texas.
So I drove up there and I got stood up.
Can I pause for 1 second? What was her name? I have
no idea.
No idea.
I don't remember any. I never met her again. I don't know.
Okay.
I had somebody else show up.
Well, it was a long time ago. This has been a minute.
So I'm up there on the northwest side of town, and I want to go see the movie. We'll tell you what the movie is in a minute, because that's that's an important piece of this. And I had a fair amount of time because I was going to go to dinner first and, that kind of thing. So I'm sitting there going, okay, what am I going to do? Her store had a Spider-Man pinball machine. Now, short of showing you a picture of it, that was my favorite. I could put a quarter in it and play for hours on one.
All night long.
Night long. Okay. And so I said, well, that really what I really wasn't planning to go do that, but what the heck, I'll go hang out there because it's kind of on the way from where I was to the movies.
Yeah.
And so I get to the store and put my quarter in and I'm playing for a few minutes, and she lives in the back room at Phoenix, which was Phoenix Comics, which she opened in 1985.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
But this was her store. I was just a customer. And she pokes her head out of the back room. She knew me. We didn't know each other well, but I knew who she was, and I guess she knew a little bit about, and
Sure.
I was more dressed up. Okay. Back in 86 or 87, about when this was going on, for me to be dressed up meant I was wearing not a t-shirt and not shorts.
Okay.
And actual shoes instead of sandals.
So like formal wear. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Formal.
I got you.
And she was like, "You're all dressed up. What's going on?" And I basically said, I got stood up on a date.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go to dinner and a movie? And she was like, I don't know how you reacted to that. I don't remember.
I don't remember you saying anything about dinner, and I don't think we did dinner. Yeah. But I do, but what I do, he came in and he said he got stood up and he goes, "Do you want to go to a movie?" I am a big movie fan. So I've been watching movies. I mean, my mom would take us all the time. So
she asked what movie it was, and I told her. It was Jean Cocteau's La Belle et la Bête. If you have never seen it, you need to.
Yes, you need to.
Okay.
It's Beauty and the Beast by Jean Cocteau, who is one of the premier French poets and writers and movie directors. I think he starred in a couple of his own movies from the 20s and the 30s into the 40s. And it is absolutely the most amazing Beauty and the Beast story you've ever seen. Now, I had seen it before. She'd never even heard of it, much less seen it. And so we went to the movie.
Yeah,
I do want to pause there. You said I got stood up. Do you want to go to the movies? Which, by the way, is the thing that every little girl hopes to hear when she meets the man of her dreams.
Of course.
And two, she didn't immediately say yes. She said, "Oh, what movie? Where are we going? Let's hear what your plan is before I agree to this." Yeah, I got you. All right.
Well, you probably got me at movies just because I like movies, and in Houston, all the movie theaters are like pretty far apart, and so you don't go to the movies all the time like you do in Dallas, because everywhere you look, there's a theater in Dallas. So yeah, I was interested in the movie, but it's the first movie I have ever been more interested in what's happening in the background than the actual story, because he has so much stuff going on with, in the fireplace, in the, on the table or the stuff. And so it was a really amazing movie.
And after we got done seeing the movie, we spent 3 hours sitting outside your apartment.
We sat in the car we got ice cream. That's what I thought.
Okay.
We got ice cream and we sat in the car and talked forever. Just really long time.
And it was, to make a long story short, it was downhill from there, or uphill depending upon your direction.
Yeah. Because at that point, you're just you love movies, right? You both love movies. You both love comics, obviously. And Mike, I'm told that you were $100 a week habit there, Jeremy.
More than that.
It was a lot.
I bought every single small press title there was in 1986, and that's a bunch.
We're talking about the black and white boom, right?
Right.
That period.
Yeah, I loved the small press.
The more obscure, the more interested he was.
Yep, that was me.
Wow,
Mr. Obscure.
On. Well, all right. So I want to back up because there is a lot. I was able to find out a lot more about my friend Jeremy. I've never really gotten to know Cecilia because Jeremy shows up at, industry events and he's got his bowler hat.
Woman.
She's the mystery woman.
Yes, I know she.
And I don't. So here's what I know. I know that you opened this comic shop called Phoenix in Houston. Let's see. When was this? This was back in 85, right?
85. December 85 was the first sale of comics.
Now, was John Carbonaro your partner there? Is that what I'm reading?
He was my boyfriend, I guess. But that could have been later. I mean, I mean, if you want me to start at the
Let's be all
beginning.
right. Let's go back. Go back as
Okay.
far back as you need to. I don't know if you've watched many episodes of this show, but I will legitimately spend the next 30 minutes talking about your parents if you're
All right.
interested. I'm happy to go deep. Okay.
Okay. So if we're going to go back that far,
Sure.
um, I got into comics maybe when I was 12, but it was because my brother Ray was an exchange student to Costa Rica. So he goes as an exchange student and lives with a family. He can speak Spanish. I mean, my mother's family all spoke Spanish fluently. We spoke a kind of in and out English, Spanish thing,
Right.
but he was an avid reader. So when he got over there, he could kind of understand the comics even in Spanish. And then he found a place that had them in English. So he was into it. And
Right.
so he was reading comics. He came back with this big habit of reading comics. And when I was going to go to, I read some at 12, 13, and followed a few things. Conan was the first big deal to me. Although, since I didn't know how it's pronounced back then, I think I said Conan instead
Right.
of Conan, which happened later with the movie.
I always like to think of that as the nerd accent. It's, when you say the word you've only ever read, and and
Right.
it reveals that you've never used this word in public before.
Yeah, I was wondering
Yeah.
because Balit or Balit, or I don't know even how that's pronounced perfectly, but she was
Ballet.
she was the one in who was the captain of the ship, the
Oh
pirate
yeah.
ship. So anyway, yeah, there were things like that, but I had read then. But my brother said when he went to college, he goes, comics are the perfect thing for between classes because you only have like 10 minutes or whatever else, and you need to get out of this thought, out of math and get into, government or whatever else. And the way you can clear the palate was a comic book. And so he recommended it to me. So when I went to college, I started, picking up comics. Now, back
Mm-hmm.
then, I didn't know anything about comic shops or whatever. So I was going to the 7-Eleven, and, the 7-Eleven would have the next issue sometimes, but you maybe had to go to 5 or 6 7-Elevens to get all the
Right.
ones that you're following. And then when I found Camelot Comics, which was J.R. Riley's store, that it was like finding heaven. I mean, I could go in, they had lots of comics. And that's where I met John Carbonaro. He was friends with JR and had come down to help him out. So he was working kind of as a manager, and my interactions with John was a whole lot, because John would say, "Oh, well, you should read this, and you should read," and he was pointing out all the best stuff.
Right.
And I had been, I'd gone to, well, I started at St. Edward's in Austin, and then went to UT for a little while, well, one semester, and then I was about to ready to join the army. I mean, I was working out with the guys that were about to enlist or whatever else in the morning. I was that close, but
Yeah.
my cousin said, "Oh man, you should go to college first because then you'll go in as an officer because you get credit for the classes." Um, so I ended up going to St. Thomas, which was in Houston, which is how I ended up in Houston. And I loved it. I loved it was tiny. It was smaller than my high school, the university there. And they were all kids coming from, really good families and stuff like that. Um, and the interaction was really awesome. Um, and I started, I did a lot of stuff there at the university. I was a student justice. I was head of the business club. I was vice president of the economics club and all that stuff. With the business club, it was funny because when the student council asked us what we wanted to get for our allowance from the student council, I said, we're the business club. We shouldn't be asking for money. If we can't earn it ourselves, then what is the point?
Already the entrepreneur, right? Yeah.
So we set up a little business on campus, and I still asked for a token of $25, thinking the next president might not want to go through that much trouble. But we did really well, and they were so impressed that they ended up giving us $400 anyway, because they wanted to reward us for doing that. But and that'll factor in later. But anyway, I came in to do uh let's see, we did
You were in business
college.
club.
Yeah.
You were
I'm
in
doing,
college.
I got an accounting degree. I've had this awesome accounting teacher and as a matter of fact, she was responsible for about a third of the people who got into accounting as a degree, because she made it fun. I would like, how do you make accounting fun? But she really did.
Man, if you
And
could figure that out for me, I'd appreciate it. As an entrepreneur, it's my least favorite thing. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I liked business so much, but I added the accounting. So I actually had, a BA in business and a BBA in accounting. So I did that, and I had a job before I was out of school. So I was doing that, and I had so much money coming in from the accounting that I was at the comic store all the time. I was spending $200,
You're just making it
$300.
rain at the comic shop, right? Yeah.
They
Yeah.
loved me.
I bet.
And because I had that kind of money to spend, and I was there almost every day or whatever else, they didn't tell me the same lies that they told the other customers, because back then JR was kind of not a very good businessman, and he would spend money out of the cash register to do things. So he had, at the time, we didn't have Capital City in town yet.
Right.
People were using Friendly Franks mostly
For distribution, right?
and
Distribution, yeah.
and you some people would do to Capital City. It just depended on who you had not paid.
It's a very long history in the comic book business of I'll just go with somebody who doesn't know that I'm a deadbeat. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Martin
There's
Goodman smiles on us from above. Yeah.
It is not, and it's, and in some ways the old days have come back.
Yes.
But yeah. So
Friendly
wait,
Frank.
were you following at this point? You're shopping at this place and you're making it rain every week because you're doing so well in your accounting work, and you love comics.
Right.
Are you so into it that you're like getting, you're understanding how the distribution of this business works? You're like essentially looking into the mechanics of it early on?
No, I didn't know it at that time.
Okay.
I mean, I knew I was there, and I knew that, hey, the comics I wanted to buy are not on the shelf.
Right.
And since it was all kind of airshipped in, it like, I think even at that time, California had the deal where they trucked. So they got their comics like 2 weeks after, because they used a trucking system to make it cheaper for everybody.
Oh,
but
okay.
but in Houston, there was not that kind of friendliness. You had to airship it in, because otherwise they were going to buy it from the other guy.
Yeah.
So I knew that kind of stuff, and Third Planet was around, and
they're still around.
And Roy's, and Third Planet's still in business.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were the various shops. I went to some of the comic conventions before I got into business, but anyway, they told me that their books were actually sitting on the dock at the airport. They just didn't have the money to pick it up.
Oh no.
And this is how I got into business. So I'm I've got money. I'm kind of like, I could be nice. I would get my comics.
Yeah.
I'm fine to just give them the money. They'll pick up their books. They would get their money from various people in a short period of time. They could pay me back. I don't even care about interest. I'm just,
Right.
was going to help out. And so I go and pick up $5,000 worth of comic books.
This was back when cover price of comics
Like
was
60 cents.
60 cents. So you can do the math on how many comics that was.
That's a lot of
Right.
comics.
Yes,
A lot of comics.
There are plenty of stores out right now that $5,000 a week in wholesale would be a huge week for
Right.
them, right? There's yeah.
Oh, this wasn't a week. This was 3
It was
weeks.
several weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
At least
Okay.
2, if not 3 weeks worth of stuff that
I
he
got
had
you.
not paid.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they were lying that to the customers, oh, they're not shipping, they're not doing their job, and
That
all these
distributor.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I knew the real thing because I was there every day. I overhear the conversation.
That
When
has
in doubt,
never
blame, when in doubt, blame Diamond. Yep.
That's
Yeah.
It wasn't Freeman Frank back then.
Yeah. And
So
he gets the joke.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's a sample. We're pulling that sample out. When in
You
doubt,
go right ahead.
blame
When in doubt.
Diamond.
That's right.
So anyway, I go pick it up with John Carbonaro and we take it back to my apartment and do all that stuff. The next day, I mean, was going to bring them in a day or two or whatever else because it was a lot. I mean, 5,000. It was a lot. It was all over the apartment. The next day, I realized that he not only is taking money out of the register for other things, he's not paying his sales tax. So
no.
the sales tax people come and confiscate all the money in the register and threaten to sell off anything that goes in the store.
Yeah.
So I'm in what do I do now?
Wait, so you have this shipment still at your apartment, or did
Still
it
at my apartment. And maybe it was that day that they came in and confiscated everything. But we contacted them and said, can I do this? We just wanted to, sell and get the money back. And they said, if I brought the stuff in, they could confiscate it and sell it to pay off his sales tax bill. So
Okay.
I'm in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, what can we do? And I tried to work out, something with JR. But what we did was 2 doors down from Camelot was a gaming store. And
No, not just
no,
a game store. The game store.
Okay.
It's still the game store today.
Oh.
It's still there. Nan's Games and Comics is what it's called now.
Okay.
Back in 85,
It's
Games and Comics? No way. You can't mix that stuff. Nobody
No.
cares. Nobody would ever do that.
it's matter and antimatter. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Exactly. So anyway, go on. Sorry.
So, and Nance ran all the conventions for games and stuff back then. But I worked out a deal with Nans that we could rent 2 tables in his store. And I just wanted to sell enough to get my money back. I would have given him the rest of it. And I was trying to work out, look, just send people to get their stuff for that. And as soon as I get my money, you can have the rest,
Mhm.
no problem. But he wouldn't, he said, okay. And so he double
It's
bought.
comics in my game store.
So no, this is J.R. Riley who
Oh, right. Okay.
said he double bought from Friendly Frank. He ordered stuff that Frank had that was duplicating what I had to put in his store since, so he could fill his own subscriptions and stuff like that. So my inventory is getting old by the day. And if you don't buy the new stuff, then you can't
sell the old stuff
because he wouldn't work out any deal with me. So I'm in business. And John Carbonaro, white knight that he always was, he said, that's not right. You shouldn't be that way. He quit JR and came and worked for me and taught me everything about the business. So He
Amazing. So when did you
he
go from being in that game store? I assume you moved to your own location, right?
right. So we ended up in the game store for 2 months, maybe 2 months, and then the the landlord
I don't
let us
know.
I
have.
wasn't there.
That's correct. I wasn't. Actually, I was there
He
early
was
on,
there.
but
He
I
went to the
wasn't
game
part of the
store.
business.
Yeah, I got you.
He didn't know. Yeah,
I was just a customer.
we didn't know each other back then.
Yeah.
So the landlord gave me a deal on the space on the corner. He wasn't charging me full price. And so I moved into that space, and John worked out. He found like
Fixtures.
a fixture. Yeah, the fixtures to put in, and we painted. There was like really dark paint in there. And so we painted the walls black, I think, to make just a cover. So it would cover easily. But actually, black really highlights comics. So, like when we pinned them on the wall, they looked awesome. But
Yeah.
I don't think most people would put them on black like that or want to paint their place black. But it did look really, really good. And
I want to say that the walls at Third Eye are black. I want to say no, I think they're deep blue, but maybe something like that.
They're
Yeah.
a darker color. From the pictures I've seen. I've never actually been there, but from the pictures I've seen, it's a deeper shade of whatever it is.
Yeah.
But,
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, we were putting comics or special comics in Mylar and pinning them on the wall, and they looked so good.
I bet.
So that worked out, and that was right at the time of the black and white boom. And oh my goodness, I mean, compared to what you have today with the diamond catalog and all that kind of stuff, I mean, we had a few pieces of paper, flyers that at most, and usually it was like you got a one liner with the name, and it didn't say who the artist was or who you might you just have the name and the price.
Right.
It was doing orders back then. So
throwing darts at the wall.
I think, where's my magic ball? And
is there? I mean, I think I feel confident. I mean, we're talking late '80s, so I've seen some of that, like some of the sort of magazines and stuff.
This was mid '80s. It's
mid '80s.
By the late '80s, we'd already progressed to multi-page previews with color pictures and things like that. In the mid '80s, previews was like 8 pages long, stapled together.
Yeah, I've seen those. I think I actually have the first like 10 previews catalogs. So I've seen them, but I guess my question is, how are you learning about like new books that are coming out? I mean, because we're talking about a time of like super creative time where all these different titles are coming out. Are you just seeing Love and Rockets #1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1? I mean, we're just seeing that as a line and nothing else? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think we were on either #2 or #3 for Turtles coming out. But back then, Turtles had, a 3,000
not
print
many.
run? I mean, it was tiny. And Camelot had built up a big group of people. And since a lot of them came to me to get books, they started switching over because mine were actually there on time. And I want to go back because Jared was kind of a cool guy. He brought in people to sign for signings and stuff like that. He had this wonderful, like, big giant poster that everyone who came to any of his signings or whatever had written their signature, and some of them had drawn little things on the wall. It was super cool. And he had a very big shop with lots of comics, so there was lots to a pretty full run of stuff. But we ended up going to the corner, and then eventually I moved down the street about a block on the other side of the freeway. And it's a tiny place.
I think it was maybe 1,600 square feet. It was very small.
I don't even know if it was that big. It was really little.
1,600. I get that you're. I mean, as a native Texan, I feel that, space just feels like your birthright. But 1,600 square feet is not a small shop even now. But all right, carry on.
Yeah, I don't think it was that big. I thought it was 800 square
It
feet.
was very
It
small.
was tiny.
800. Yeah, that would
It was
definitely.
tiny. There was one little back room area, and then there was the area where we put the pinball games, and the main area was. It was just so small. I mean, once you had the register, you had a couple of tables, and it was really small. But I had 800 subscribers.
Hold on. You had 800
100
subscribers.
subscribers.
Insane.
It was Houston. In Houston, anybody would drive anywhere to get what they wanted.
Wow. Yeah.
800 subscribers. So
Wow.
and
Okay.
and there must have been even a bigger pot of subscribers because you had Camelot and Third Planet and me all within 2 miles of each other. And the customers loved it because if one of us didn't have it,
Of course.
somebody else would.
Yeah.
So, and I wasn't going for, having a big selection because Camelot had that and Third Planet had that and Roy's had that. And I was just going for a really good price.
Yes, she skipped over Roy Bonario, who is actually still with us. Thank he's 86, 87. He in the mid 80s, he'd been selling comics at retail for years.
Forever.
Yeah. So
and most of the shops were like comics and records. It wasn't like vinyl. Yeah. But Roy sold also pictures.
Yeah, he had memorabilia.
Yeah, memorabilia.
He was a big Western guy. Anyway, go back to your story. I wanted to make sure I said Roy's name because he deserves to be mentioned and remembered.
Yeah, he does. And and like I said, it wasn't Roy. Roy was never really part of it because he was too far out from where we were. But the people who were close enough to me, I mean, they were not friendly people. I mean, Third Planet, TJ was, I thought when we had just gotten, the answering machines. And I thought he was brilliant because what he did with the answering machine was he would say what all the titles that came in, which I thought was a great innovation for, somebody called the store and then they would hear what the titles are and they could know whether to come in or not. But he started each of his things with, well, those girls over at, Phoenix Comics, they just don't know what they're doing and they're crazy, all this kind of stuff.
He does this every week?
Every week he would say, he would cut down the other stores.
On his little radio voicemail message. Right. That's
and then he would give the list and stuff. But I didn't worry about that. I mean, it was mean stuff. Like they would turn other people in to the IRS to be audited, or they would super glue in the locks. I mean, they're not. This was not nice stuff.
Houston was very cutthroat and very competitive back at that point in time. Extremely so.
That is crazy. All right.
Right. And I tried to stay out of the fight, but it was kind of interesting because all of us had to go down to the airport to get our comics, right? So we're all there waiting for the shipment. And it's like one of these old Westerns where they're doing the, you have a circle, we don't know who to shoot. But
did you do the thing? Because when I started in comics, I remember having to go working in a comic shop in California in the early 90s. At one point I started picking up, and we had to go to this warehouse, it was like a drop off point. Right. And everybody would come. It was on Wednesday morning. So when I hear retailers complaining about not having Tuesday, I get whatever. Listen, youngster.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But this is like Tuesday morning, and you have to get up at 4 a.m. to be the first person there, because if you're not the first person there, you're not going to get your stuff so that you can get on the road, because then you're going to get caught in traffic and you're not going to get home until like 10 or 11, and then you got all day to fix the thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I remember that, but it was like everybody's keeping track. All right, you're next, and then he's next. Okay, great. Don't you
it
don't
it
jump in
wasn't.
front of me.
I've certainly experienced that here in Dallas with the, because first come, first serve. But
Yeah.
there was like only five of us that would show up to the airport. And you know how the way that everybody get their luggage kind of almost at once. There
Yeah.
really wasn't the,
Okay.
okay, you're going to have to wait a really
Yeah.
long time. You're just waiting for your name. And so that wasn't, it wasn't really a try to get in front. It's just, it was hard to talk. You're sitting there and you're trying to go, what can I say to this guy who might,
Who's
do
gonna
something
trash me
really
on
fun.
his voicemail?
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I just tried to, smile and not be a part of whatever
yeah.
issues they had with each other and things like that. And it paid off later on. I had my roommate and good friend Sarah Durham. She became my manager. Also was in accounting, but she was in my. I was a RA at St. Thomas, and she was one of my residents. And that's how I got to know her. And then we had fun together whenever we were together. So
Yeah.
we got to be good friends, and she became my manager. And she was perfect because she had she was very feisty, had a lot of fire in her, and she would, like when Capital City came in, she would go, we didn't get this, we didn't get that. She was always, complaining about the stuff. And I'd come in and I'm like, I love the job y'all are doing. I'm doing all the sweet stuff. So she was definitely the bad cop and I was doing the good cop. And we got all our stuff because if they didn't like you, remember there used to be the strings. And so the
Yeah.
first copies on the top and the copies on the bottom, they were damaged.
Right.
And those went to the stores that kind of irked them for how they were acting,
Yeah.
or complained too much or whatever. But they loved me, and they would kind of snap too because Sarah was always like right on their case. Um,
And that has never happened since, considering how many people I know who complain a lot always seem to have the most damages. I wonder
yeah,
why it is. You're so loud about your criticisms, and yet you always get damaged product. That's crazy to me. I can't imagine how that
yeah, or
happens.
It's
missing.
weird how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. So
So,
anyway, yeah,
yeah.
that one.
Well, so
That,
at that point, at what point do you decide? Okay, I'm have this lucrative career. I'm a young 20 something in Houston. I'm making good money accounting. I now own a comic book shop accidentally. At what point do you go, all right, accounting? I'm just going to run my own books at this point. Like, where does
oh,
that transition happen, or does it ever? You might still be keeping other people's books. Is all as far as I'm
no,
concerned.
no, no, no. It
Yeah.
it actually sort of when I first ended up with the product and everything, I was still working. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time there was a big governmental, you've got to do um uh you've got to do the way you charge on fields. They were producing natural gas and stuff like that. So that's what I was
Okay.
working on.
Yeah.
And they got this, you've got to go back through every single account and redo it and reconfigure how much they're supposed to get. And so we had this tons of work, and there was a lot of stress, and people were being fired because you couldn't make enough money to do all this stuff. And I got to a point that I was kind of like, put me on the top of the list, because I mean people were being fired weekly and it was just
Yeah.
this terrible stress. And it was a very bad situation. So they accommodated me and you know laid me off and walked me out of the building so that I wouldn't damage anything or whatever else. It was really embarrassing the way that worked. But
And you
uh
decided to run a comic book shop, which has never been stressful a day
and
in your life, right? It has
Sarah,
never.
Sarah Durham and I went to dinner, and then we said, this is going to be our last dinner out. We can't afford anymore. We're going to be eating ramen and peanut butter. Uh, and yeah, it was kind of like that. We couldn't spend any money um, for for anything for a while, but it kind of worked out. And Sarah was more the face. He's right. I would stay in the back,
Mm-hmm.
but before the date came
Yeah.
about, there actually was a see, Jeremy was our most obnoxious customer.
That's
Shocking to
me,
me.
Mr. Obnoxious. Never
While we
once.
were
I know.
He was
while we
never
were
get-
talking, I looked up did an inflation calculator, and it turns out $100 in 1985 is $293 today. So your boy was spending $1,200 a month in this place.
He was spending a lot of money. It's true, but a lot of people
was-
were spending a lot of money.
Yeah,
I had 800 subscribers.
I was
he wasn't the only one.
I was a computer operator making $9 an hour in 1985.
Right.
I was, and I lived at home.
What are you gonna do with the money otherwise? Right.
Yeah.
Yep, pretty much.
I got you. Yeah. Until you met an accountant and then she told you how to take care of your money.
That's a longer story.
But yeah, I got laid off, so I worked full time at the store. I had bought the second store out at Gessner.
You didn't even tell them there were two stores.
Yeah.
First I've heard of two stores. Yeah.
Yep,
Well, that's where Chip worked. I would have thought that would.
No, Chip didn't mention any of that.
He didn't mention it.
He didn't mention two stores. It's weird though, because he said he worked for Jeremy, but he also says he worked for Cecilia. So I want to hear how this transition happens.
Go ahead.
So Sarah and I ended up moving into a garage apartment, which was right by the second corner, the corner store that we went to. Mm-hmm. So I was right there, and then a block away is the Shepherd store. So we could walk over there, I guess, if we needed to, which we kind of needed to because there was no parking. It was the bad part of that, having so many subscribers, and because they had to figure out a place to park. We were doing that, and the second store came available. It was a couple of fanboys that had started up a store out in Gessner,
west side of town. The first store is right downtown. Say it's basically Shepherd and 59, which is about as downtown as you can get without actually being in downtown, if you know Houston at all. Mm-hmm. And the other store was at Gessner and Long Point, I believe. Something like that.
I don't know. Chip mentions it in his.
Yeah, it's pretty far west from where that was. It's good half hour from the other store.
But he wanted to sell out because that's the one thing that I saw about comic store owners back then, is that not only were they not female, understandable, it was like 95% male clientele at the time. But they didn't know a lot about business. TJ did from Third Planet, but and he always way overcharged on his comics, because even back then he was charging $5 for brand new off the shelf stuff. When it went to back stock, it was incredibly expensive. You could get it, but you're going to really pay for it.
It's there. Yeah. The old adage of price, service, and selection. He was happy to be service and selection, or at least selection.
And it built on itself, because when he was charging that made people feel like their comic was worth that.
Right.
And so then they're like, oh, I need to buy this up because it's going to go to $5 in just a month or two. So
we're gonna call that the
60 to 80 cents. Remember.
60
cents. Okay. Yeah, you have to remember that cover price was way different than today, because $5 today is, well, that's cover price.
Yeah.
No, comic books back then were 75 cents, that kind of thing.
We're gonna call that the Chuck Rosansky model.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. And you had the price guide once a year, so you kind of could make up your price in between. It was a lot of supply and demand, but since the three of us were right there, we had to kind of pay attention to who else
Mm-hmm.
had the comics. JR did when he did this 50% off sale, and even at 50% off, I was way cheaper than him. But people were confused by the math, and they would go to and buy stuff from him, even though they were spending more money than my shop. So
So you've opened a second shop, and at this point, so this is I did want to
oh wait,
tap
I
on
didn't
something
finish
here.
that
Oh yeah,
other
sorry. Go
story.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. There was something that happened before where I'm sitting in the back room, and I would greet people, like we'd leave the door open, and there was a computer back there, but um I'd greet people as they came by to look at stuff. But Jeremy, the reason Jeremy was so obnoxious is because he would come in to get his stuff, and he would go, well, let's see what you missed this time. And it was like,
I can hear it.
Yep.
it
I'm
was,
sure nothing has changed. That sounds exactly like as a publisher who has dealt with Jeremy as a customer, I can absolutely hear that tone.
it, it
Thank you.
hurt. It hurt. It was true. Honestly, we had missed something pretty much. We worked so hard on his list. So hard.
Yeah.
Now, this is pre-computer. I mean, you didn't do your pull by computer. We had a list, and it had little teeny tiny, and and it's two-sided, and we're sitting there eyeballing, okay, this is this company, and we're eyeballing to what's came in new and pulling like that. And we pretty much miss something every single week.
Yeah.
He told
It
us
gave him
later.
material, though. It gave him material to talk to the girls at the comic shop. I mean,
Correct.
come on.
I had a crush on Sarah for the longest time.
Right. He was
Of
he
course you
liked
did.
my manager, and I thought, later on that he was coming in to, play the pinball, but anyway, so I'm sitting in the back. I'm sitting in the back, and he comes by, and I do the regular greeting like you do to people when you see them, because you're actually genuinely happy to see them, because
Yeah.
it's fun to talk to people about comics, and they're giving you money. And every time they handed me a stack like this and gave me $20, I'm like, why? But I was so happy that they were doing that
Yeah.
stuff. um and he said, I'm smiling, I'm happy. And I'm like, yeah, how are you doing? And he goes, why are you so sad all the time? And I'm like,
Oh.
I was sad
Yeah.
at the time, and yet I thought, I've got this hidden, nobody sees it. And he did. And I thought, okay, there is more to this guy than I thought. And I need to look for what that more is, because it's one thing to even see it, but people don't say anything.
Yeah.
They just kind of pass by, they just let you do your thing. And I that was something that made me notice him, so I was more open to when we did the date. I probably would have gone to the movie anyway. I just like movies.
I didn't know that, by the way.
Yeah, he didn't know
Well,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, it started, I don't know, Jeremy and my dating was not like anybody else's that I know of. It was like this really long interview. Um
She interviewing me, not the other way around.
he would come over. I had the garage apartment, right? So it has
Uh-huh.
this really long set of stairs to get up to the garage, and we would sit on those stairs and talk
Uh-huh.
and talk and talk. And I was always asking him questions, hypotheticals, to see
Sure.
where his values were, where his, what he thought. And he didn't know me well enough to be able to cheat. I mean, you can cheat on some things, but he wasn't even trying. He was just straight up
He's just
saying
being
what it
Jeremy.
is.
Yeah.
And, I
Because he didn't
realized,
know. He didn't know he was auditioning. He just
No.
thought you were asking questions. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So we just we would do like that all the time. Every single date was like that.
Hours and hours of that.
And so, yeah, we got to the point that finally I asked him to marry me. And I gave him a ring.
I knew better than to try and ask her. There was no way. It had to be her decision 100%.
Wonderful.
And so I told my friend Sarah that, what ring I wanted. So we could get the right one.
She had it planned.
That's right.
I love it.
So yeah, then we did the whole plans and everything to.
So we're
not really sure the timeline of all of this because we didn't pay attention to any of that. We know when we got married, and it was which was in February of '89.
Okay.
And I recall about 18 months before that because she didn't want that. She wanted a long engagement.
Well, no, we had to do the.
See, this is me remembering. Go ahead. You remember better than I.
Okay, back then I was Episcopalian, and my church was very high church Episcopalian, which you probably don't know what that means.
Honestly, I know plenty about Southern Baptists, but not a lot about Episcopalians.
It's a lot like Catholicism, only we had very intellectual, theological sermons, which could last an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
But my church required that you go for instruction. And so we drove up to Dallas over and over on the weekends so that we could do marriage instruction before we got married.
Drive up on Saturday, come back on Sunday. Her whole family lived and still does in Dallas.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that does explain why you came to Dallas, but that will skip ahead.
Yeah.
But I just want to double tap that. That's like a 5-hour drive.
4.5.
Well, the speed limits, when the speed limits were 55, when the speed limits got pushed down to 55, it did take 5 hours.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure.
Yeah, we still sped.
All right. So during this period, let's just call this ambiguous 18 months because you're right. It doesn't quite add up that the two of you start dating in 87 and you get married in February of 89. And you have 18 months. I don't know. But I will say, so tell me just a little bit about the Jeremy Cecilia story there, because I do want to talk about the culture of those shops and why there was something in the water there that seemed to make publishers. But,
okay.
So how do you get involved?
I started dating her, and it just seemed natural to offer to pitch in because on the weekends, at this point in time, my working career was, shall we say, a little dodgy at this point in terms of I had graduated college in '84 with a computer science degree and went to work for a OEM. I hate using acronyms. Original equipment manufacturer.
Okay.
Of what they called mini computers back at the time. Okay.
Right.
They were used all over the place, but in places like NASA. They ran oil and gas lines. They ran all sorts of things with these things. They were very fast computers. Their software sucked. The operating system was awful. If you bought the computer, unlike many other computers where if you buy the computer, you get this black box of an operating system and that's it. They gave you the source code for the operating system because they knew it sucked. And it was my job at that point to track it down. I was making good money. And then about 2 years in, we had the inevitable layoffs because it was there was a whole bunch of oil and gas stuff, and Houston being an oil and gas town, when oil goes up, everybody's happy. When oil goes down,
people get fired.
And I was not a political animal, and consequently
Shocking.
I got laid off and started working at whatever I could to make some money. And so it seemed natural at that point, since I was scrambling hard just to stay in one place, to work part-time at the store on the
Gotcha.
weekends or you know, at weeknights. And the best place she put me out at Gessner instead of at Shepherd, because they had a solid crew working at Shepherd, and Gessner was a for them a relatively new store that needed a lot of effort and struggle to keep going.
Well,
And
Gessner was probably 1600. We had to do all our work out there. If you're bagging and boarding or alphabetizing, you do it out there because there's no room at Shepherd.
yeah, Shepherd was teeny tiny. And a lot of the people who shopped at Gessner, that was where most of the back issues ended up at, was in Gessner, because they had the room for it. And so we had a lot of people coming out there. Joe Nosemack. He was a regular out there. He didn't work for her. She doesn't know. She didn't even remember that Joe did that, because I was at Gessner all the time. Yeah. I ran into Joe all the time. And there's another guy whose name escapes me. Anyway, he ended up doing a couple of comic book series for Marvel. I'm trying to remember the one now. The one that the comic that I can't remember which one, but you may, that had a bit, the cover had a square in the middle of it that folded out. Forceworks, that's what it was called.
Oh, Forceworks. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and he penciled the whole thing, and he was a regular out there as well, along with working with Chip. When he wasn't working at Shepherd, he would work out at Gessner. The whole goal was to keep feeding Shepherd, because we knew Shepherd was where all the money was coming out of Shepherd. So our job at Gessner was to keep the back stock and the front stock moving in a way that Shepherd got fed faster.
Handling all the bags of boards, handling all of the filing, alphabetizing and whatnot. Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're still seeing a lot of that today. We had a conversation with the guys from a comics place, and they were telling the story about how they had one store that just was not performing, but they now know how to deal with back issues because of that store. So yeah. Anyway, okay. So what was in the water? What is it you think? Is it just because Houston is such... I mean, Joe Nosemack, you just mentioned, was one of the founders of Oni Press. We know Chip Mosier. I won't go deep into his resume because we have a whole 2 hours on him already. Like there's a whole lot of this going on in that area during this period. What is it about that time and place, you think, that created this generation of people?
My 2 bits.
Yeah.
I don't have any deep insider input. Houston was a much more unrestrained town than a lot of places were. There was a legitimate reason why all of the boom and bust oil people went there, because it was kind of anything goes. You do what you want. I mean, I can't remember the name of the guy. You'll remember him, who opened up like 12 stores in a year, 6 of which went under almost immediately. Y'all all hated him. I can't remember. In Houston? Yeah, in Houston. It's long time ago. I don't even, like I say, I can hear Sarah Durham yelling his name now.
Yeah, probably. She watches this.
Yeah. And so, anyway, there was a whole bunch of that kind of stuff going on, that people just did what they wanted. You had 3 of the biggest stores in town, literally. Huge operations. I mean, we went to pick up our comics at the same time. We could see how many boxes people got.
Yeah.
Okay. And 3 of the biggest stores in town within 2 miles of each other. That's just in a town as huge as Houston is. It was just crazy. And it just was the perfect combination. There's really no other way to describe it, in my opinion. It was just the right combination of things going the way that everybody could do those things, could see the opportunities and go that way. And I mean, like I say, people like Joe Nosmak, I don't know how he ended up in either Portland or Seattle, wherever Oni was based.
Sure.
It's one of those two places. But he ended up there, and he obviously got people interested and excited in his company. And I mean, you've got Antarctic Press, Ben Dunn's from down there too,
Yeah,
and Brenner Printing, which was in San Antonio. They printed
right.
a whole bunch of small press for a very, very long period of time. A bunch of small press people got their stuff done there. It was just a more open time where things just kind of, you could do it and get away with it.
I don't
have a better reason.
No, I think you think you're onto something here, and I never really have thought about it. But as I said, a native Texan, I spent first 20 years of my life living in Fort Worth, real close to you guys, and you saying that suddenly there are pieces falling together. Texas is a real bad town for unions, right? Unions don't do well in Texas, right? But Texas fights regulation, which is why it often finds itself in energy crises, because nobody thought maybe we should make sure everybody's getting electricity. There's all of these things that Texas does. There are the kind of like almost punchlines for other people, but they come from that desire for independence. Right. And I think maybe that's it. Maybe that's part of why I'm why I'm an entrepreneur, why you are, why guys like Chip and Joe.
No, that's the entrepreneur.
She's the entrepreneur.
He did this.
Yeah.
I understand. You have always said that.
It. I didn't start running the store until late 93, 94. I was just a guy who helped out and worked. Really. I didn't.
Yeah. He says he basically volunteered to come in to work, and I didn't know it was ever financial, but oh my God, okay. this guy is like born for the business. I mean, he's a machine for working. At Phoenix, we used to do
speed tests
on who could alphabetize a long box faster, and bag of board and all this kind of stuff. And we did all this stuff. And I had been, I'd had years of experience. I mean, he had with his own collection, but I had years of experience of doing it and testing against the other employees and stuff. He comes in and he's almost as good as me at the beginning. I mean, right off the bat. And he still does this. He competes against himself. So everything he does, he's always trying to be faster, better, more efficient, and of course it makes the rest of us, it's like, we can't keep up with them.
What's your, I can tell you, I do know my personal best is just under 4 minutes for doing 100 bags and boards. I don't know.
I don't think I was ever that fast, but it was
okay.
Under 8 minutes. For sure.
We used to do this at Comics Pro events. We used to I remember we'd always keep bags and boards around, and we go, ready, go, and just see who could get. It's the nerdiest thing you can do while drinking in a suite.
And yes. The most essential job that any comic store has is making bags and boards.
Absolutely.
100%.
There's no way around it. Nope. All right, I want to jump ahead. We are an hour in, and we're basically on my first question.
Oh dear, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I do want to
happen. By the way,
I know, but I am.
She has a very long story just to get to where, okay, the business is running now.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I've known Jeremy now in the industry for probably 20 years. Mm-hmm. And every time, I always knew you as the guy who shows up with the bowler hat and the cart full of short boxes. And you're always so nice and pleasant. And anytime somebody talks about your shop, you say, oh, no, it's hers.
Yeah.
It's my wife's shop. I work at my wife's shop. And I'm at this point, I'm like, I know you 20 years. You can say it's your shop, right? But he doesn't. He never does. So I'm so happy to finally have this opportunity to hear the story, because, we do get it. But I don't want to spend taking up your entire evening. So I want to tell you what I know, and we can kind of skip a little bit ahead, because I'd like to get into where we are today. Sure. But I do want to spend some time talking about something that I think is really kind of beautiful, which is the fact that you two have now worked together side by side since, what we're talking about, 1986, 87?
Something like that.
87 for
86,
sure.
80, yeah, 87 for sure, and probably late 86.
Yeah.
We're going to get into the kids that came into your lives as a result of
Sure.
of this marriage, but how is that relationship, like, I mean, I can tell you from my own experience how challenging it was to have my personal relationship and my professional relationship completely tied to each other. And I've been vocal about saying, I think that in many ways, part of the reason that they both fell apart was that they were so tied to each other. Right? They just fell apart at the same time. I've seen that, but I've also, you two are, seemingly rare in that you've done this now for 4 decades, right?
Yep.
Coming up on 40 years, you two have been doing this, right? So are there best practices? Is there a secret sauce? Is there, like, what do you...
sauce for me? Okay,
Yeah.
I can't speak for her. I've never been able to speak for her, so
And you never would.
I never will. So don't worry. The secret sauce for me, 100% of the time, is communication. If I'm happy, if I'm sad, and if I'm whatever it might be, if I don't tell her, it's gonna come back to bite me at some point in the future. It may be next week, it may be next year, but it's gonna come back to bite me if I don't keep my communication open with her. Tell her the things that I need to say that you don't want to say, whatever it is that it might, the good, the bad, the indifferent. You got to get it all out, because it has, the pot has a way of boiling if you don't. And it's just that you just can't let it sit. You have to talk about it.
Says the man who doesn't talk about it.
Listen, we were, it sounds, I know you said, I know from your story, and we haven't dug too deep into that, but I know just from the research, you were raised all over. But I know from being raised in Texas, there's a certain brand of masculinity, and so much so that I often refer to as Texic masculinity, that means that you don't communicate. You don't say what's bothering you. You don't say when you're hurting. You don't say when you're sad. So the fact that he even holds that as an ideal, that's beyond.
Well, he's just not the typical man. We always thought he was kind of like an alien.
I am
no, seriously.
Well,
I mean,
I
not
am
like
an alien in terms of what. So I'll condense a little bit. I grew up. From 1963 to 1970, I lived outside the country. My father was a civil engineer building oil refineries. I lived in succession in Finland, India, and Venezuela for 2 years each. Then we moved to Houston for 2 years, because that's about how long it takes to build an oil refinery, by the way, is 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. But then we moved to Houston for 2 years, and then we moved to the weird foreign country of Louisiana for about 10 months, because I don't remember why that one was shorter, but it was. And then we ended up going back to Houston, where I stayed where I lived until 1990, when we got married in 89. We moved up to Dallas to be closer to her family.
Yeah. I do have a guess about why it happens faster in Louisiana. If you think there are no regulations in Texas, strip half of those away in Louisiana.
Yep. Quite possibly. I don't remember why the job didn't last as long there, but it didn't. I was a teenager by that point, and I really wasn't paying a lot of it. I was paying attention to myself instead of the things around me, so I don't really remember the details of why that happened that way.
Well, but I do want to...
The point being, by the time I was in 11th grade, I was in my 11th school. And at that, exactly. And at that point in time, it's hard to make friends. It's hard to get close to anybody. Everybody I knew at that point had known everybody they knew since they were born, practically. And I was the guy that showed up last week. Hi, that kind of thing. So I rapidly became an outsider.
Plus, he'd been skipped 2 grades ahead.
Oh, yeah.
So he was very young. I mean, he's like 16 when he graduates high school.
Yeah.
So 16-year-olds with 18-year-olds, not the greatest mix. That goes all the way
Man,
along.
that cocktail could really make a man very hard and very mean. And I think it says a lot about you that you're not those things.
Well, I have to admit why, which your research didn't find, may I add, because I don't talk about it. It's all Werner Erhard's fault.
Werner Erhard.
Not a group.
Yes, it's all Werner Erhard's fault.
You're gonna have to explain that.
Yes, I know. What you're I don't hear any keyboard in the background searching for Werner Erhard. Come on now.
That's how you save the universe.
I gave my trolls the night off.
There we go. No, so
they're not called that now.
No, they're not. They're not. They changed their name over the years. It was the Est Training, which you may not know anything about.
Oh yeah,
it's now
I know
the
about
Landmark Forum. I took it in 1976.
Yeah.
So I was in 76. I had not turned 18 yet. I was still 17, and it absolutely changed my life. And
wow.
I was not the same person anywhere after that.
Well, so, that's incredible. All right.
That's where that came from.
That feels like that could be another hour. I'm not going to touch that button because it feels like it could be another hour. And I want to talk about running a comic shop.
Sure.
But we've heard his story. Cecilia, what's the truth? How do you stay together, working together, raising a family together, running a business together for 40 years?
I learned something, and Chip says at one point that I was like mother to everybody. And
she was. And she'd buy them dinner every Wednesday night.
I bought all the
20 of them. She'd take them out to dinner every Wednesday night.
Yeah, and we did. It wasn't just that. A lot of people were getting just trade for their compensation and stuff like that. So when they had a medical bill or something like that, we just paid it. We tried to help them out, and when we got to where the workers, we almost were like a little commune thing. Like I paid for the apartment and the electricity and all that kind of stuff, and gave them the money that would have been extra after that, right? So all the money they had, they could just spend however they wanted. We did that a lot. And what I learned over the course of time was that not everybody can work and live together. I mean, I could with Sarah Durham and I could with him and whatever else, but there are a lot of people. It's only a percentage of people that can do that. I mean, as far as staying with Jeremy, oh my goodness, I mean, so many people ask me, why did you marry Jeremy? What were you thinking?
They still, to this day.
Including the children, right?
Why?
But
including my children, yes. Exactly.
But the truth is, he gives me exactly what I was looking for. Because I came from a family that was all lawyers. I told you that our religion was very high theology and stuff like that. We talked a lot about philosophy every night at the table when I was growing up. We talked about religion and philosophy and history and politics and all this stuff. And my dad was a lawyer. He met my mom in law school, who she went through part of it. And back then they would have 100 men to one woman in law school. So
kind of like comic book stores in 1985.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah,
Sure.
I had salesmen that wouldn't even talk to me because I was a woman owning the business. And they're like, disgusting. Where's the man? Where's your husband? Yeah. Where's your what? And I'm like, I wasn't married then.
It was very amusing having the female manager come out and go, this is the owner. Well, no, where's the dude?
And when they went to my male employee, he goes, it's her. And they left. So, yeah, there was stuff like that, but, everything was so intellectual and so high, that I was really worried about being bored. And that's what I wanted, is I wanted not to be bored. I wanted someone who was loyal and would stick, around, because in my whole family, we had one divorce, and that was because he beat her. We didn't have, everybody stayed together. So Jeremy, he
He just wants to talk about Cerebus. He doesn't want to talk about politics.
Yeah, well, you know.
Actually, he doesn't like to discuss as much as I would like to discuss, but
Sure.
there is not, I mean, he is, before the internet, Jeremy was the internet because he knew something about everything. He still does. You know, I can ask him about so much stuff, and he had read the encyclopedias backwards and forwards, and, you
No,
know,
I did.
he did.
That's at the risk of digressing. When I was in India, I had the world's worst case of the measles. I was literally sick for 6 months in bed. After spending 3 days with a temperature that couldn't be measured, I had to be in an ice bath every minute of the day for 3 full days.
Not measured means the thermometer went all the way to the top. And
Yeah.
so even both
Ooh.
kinds went all the way to the top. So
Yep.
they estimate, what, 108?
But somewhere north of 108, yes. And unmeasurably high temperature and fever and that sort of fun stuff. Yes, I should be dead in my brain, and we can make all sorts of fun stories of this one. Yes,
Sure,
I know
sure.
and have over the years.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But one of the things in the 6 months afterwards, we were in India, and there's no radio, there's no, at least not in English, there's no television, there's no movies, there's no VCRs. I read the encyclopedia. They had an Encyclopedia Britannica, and I read it twice because there wasn't anything else to do. So anyway, moving on.
But yeah, that's because
I had a life. Yes, I know. Don't worry.
Well, listen.
But-
someday, remind me to tell you about growing up in Texas poor and reading the Bible 3 different times in 2 different translations. Just
I
because,
believe it.
You know, that's what we did.
Nothing else to do.
Yeah.
But after all these years, I can get irritated, but bored, never. You know, he's always coming up with some new something, and he's clever in some of the things he says. So yeah, that has had a lot to do with it. But we're also people who could live and work together, which I quickly found out there's a lot of people who that just doesn't work. They need to have that time off and away from each other.
Well, I think too, it has a lot to do with. I mean, and I'm probably only speaking from experience on this one, is that when you are living together and your relationship is about this business, when the business starts to fail, it starts to feel like you are failing, right? And your relationship is failing, and that's not necessarily the case. Business is business. So
there's that.
Yeah.
So. At the risk of skipping ahead to answer one of the questions you asked me, one of the things when I started running the business in '93, after I got laid off by EDS, who I'd been working for at that point as a systems analyst, so that she could. It gets ugly and horrible, but she was taking care of other things. My decision and my choice at that point, when I looked at what sort of business I wanted to run, I wanted that, and the Simpsons had just started up about then, and the comic book store guy was a big deal back then. He kind of faded into the background, ponytail, beard, fat, opinionated, that kind of fun stuff. And we all know that stereotypes don't hurt because they're wrong. Stereotypes hurt because they're right.
Right.
Okay. And so even though at the time I have never been svelte. I've always been overweight almost my entire life. I never wanted to. I said I'm going to do everything I can to not be the comic book guy. I didn't grow a ponytail. I didn't grow a beard. I tried to dress nicely every day. And the main thing I wanted to do was I wanted to run a comic book store that I would want to shop at.
That was our theme, was that we wanted to be the store that we would want to go to.
So what that means, high level, drilling down a little bit. For example, back issues. Every back issue is bagged and boarded. Every back issue has a clear price. Every back issue is alphabetized. We have a divider for every single title. No miscellaneous sections. even if it's a 2-issue mini, boom, it gets a divider so that we can find it and you can find it as a customer.
And good lights
and yes, clean, well lit, organized. Say hello to everybody when they come in. Walmart, I learned that I cheated. I learned, the comic book business, in my opinion, a lot of the things that we do and a lot of the things that other people do, you learn what everybody else does and works for them. Walmart at the time, Walmart had a greeter at their front door. That every single person who came in, that person's job was to say hello. Even if that other person didn't interact with them, you knew you had been seen. Right. You knew you had already had a relationship with that business. I make sure, and that's one of the first things I teach my employees, is you say hello to everybody who walks in, and you don't just go hi. You say, hi, how you doing? And get their attention and have them realize that we're happy you're here. Please come in, look around, let us know if we can help you with anything. In fact, one of the big things that we find over and over these days is that the families that go to the big box stores, it doesn't matter which one, go ahead and name one. You walk into that store, and between the time you walk in the door and the time you leave, you may only ever see, much less interact with, one employee, maybe. My favorite joke is, if you want to interact with a Walmart employee, the number one easiest way is to shoplift. You'll find a bunch of Walmart employees really fast because they've got cameras on you and there are people watching you all the time. But you'll never get anyone to interact with you. And what that makes is the people who come in, particularly these days, to shop at a little store like mine, they're totally not used to having people check on them. Are you finding everything okay? I'm all right. That literally, I've had people jump back at me. I'm okay. Leave me alone. I'm cool. And it's like,
which we do if they don't want.
I just wanted to make sure you were finding everything, that you didn't have any questions, that kind of stuff. And it scares them because they're not used to it. But again, that's the kind of store I would want to go to, is the kind of store where you check on me, you ask me if I'm finding everything. And because you've been to enough comic book stores, you know how bewildering the displays can be, even if they're organized, even if they're, even if you can discern what's supposed to be where. The comic book alphabet's fungible. Where are you gonna put Superman? Where are you going to put
Spider-Man under Amazing? Is it under S? A,
that kind of thing. And meanwhile, if I'm there to give you at least a slight leg up on that, getting your questions answered, that makes me, in my opinion, a better destination for you.
Yeah, you talked about what was in the water. I do think that we had a big effect. I mean, I just talked to people who shopped for me back then. That it had an effect because, Camelot had pretty much everybody had selection. I didn't have tons of selection. I tried to go for the key things that people would want because I had a tiny bit of space. I could have more out at Gessner, but the customer service, that I could do. And we worked really hard to make sure people were happy. And it wasn't just say hello when you come in, but say goodbye. I'm noticing that you're leaving. I'm tracking you, what you're doing. And we do, if people stay in the store, we go up to them. Are you finding everything all right? Okay, let me know if you need anything. Just offer them several times so that they know you can get help. And it's interesting because the customers will pick the employee that they feel most comfortable with to go ask certain questions.
Right.
And so they will come to me, or, each of my kids have had their own groupies that want to go talk to them because they're comfortable with what they say. And so it's good to have a group. And at Shepherd, I had a guy who was just there for talking. He was an artist, C.K. Lichtenstein.
The third.
Wittgenstein. He was awesome. He was awesome to talk about comics. He could tell you about the stories, what you should look at, what you should do. And we created that thing, and we have troubles a lot of times trying to hire people because you've got to read. You've got to be able to talk the product or be able to show, and it's really hard nowadays because the product is so vast. But
It's true. It has only gotten more and more complicated, and with seemingly more information than you had back then, and yet sometimes even less. Yeah.
Right. But we have a guy who's doing labels and stuff, and he's been in the business forever.
30 years
30
plus.
years. Yeah. And then even my oldest daughter, I mean, she knows all the online stuff and whatever, so she can talk about the shows and stuff. So we try really
This
hard.
is the oldest daughter who's been in the store since she about 2 weeks after she was born. She was in the store.
I started the stores in Dallas when she was 6 months old.
So I want to talk about that. Actually, I know that I'm going to run the risk of losing time to talk about running a store, but I did want to talk about this part. So I'm gonna blast through what I know.
Okay.
So you guys in '89, you get married. In September of '90, you moved to Dallas. You and Jeremy are working as a systems engineer with Cecilia's dad. You guys then in '91, Sarah is born. And apparently, Cecilia gets bored. So you have with a 2-month-old. I don't know.
But Sarah was born in December of '90, so you're close. Okay,
6 months.
And then somewhere in the February March range, she's bored. No, she
wasn't bored. It had nothing to do with being bored.
Okay.
So like I'm home. I have the baby, and my plan in my head was I was going to have 2 to 3 babies, and then we'd get back into a store. I had sold the stores down in Houston. I don't want to go into it, but I don't know. We could
we'd have another hour to talk about that.
We sold the stores, that didn't work. I had to go down and take it back. Anyway, but when I started the store up in Dallas, Sarah was 6 months old, and the perfect location opened up. I mean, it felt like it's the perfect location. It was the nicest landlords I'd ever had. There was plenty of parking. I had lots of, you want big glass areas so that you can show stuff. We did the fold out for X-Men. I had it painted, and we put them in the windows.
Oh, wow, that big Jim Lee cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, it doesn't matter. We had that done.
We are absolutely a team. Okay.
I can tell. And you're not keeping score, but Jeremy is.
But yeah. Then for EDS. I mean, you said working with Dad, and it's true. Dad was the lawyer for EDS, and he was in some other part.
Exactly.
But it's true. And when I started, and I thought it was still pretty 90% of the clientele are going to be men, probably 95 still. And I thought they're not going to react well to a baby being in the store, right? I thought they were going to be so mean or so upset with me or whatever else. And it wasn't like that at all. I mean, these nerdy guys that liked comics, they were the sweetest. They had no problem whatsoever. I set the changing table so it's just inside the back room door so that you don't see anything while I'm doing it, but I can watch the store. And I had a manager, come up, and he was good about when it was so much easier to run a business than to raise children. So much easier. And I just, but he would come and he would scoop Sarah, my oldest is named Sarah, and just say, don't touch comics. And he was just super sweet. And we'd put her in one of these half-size boxes, and she would sit there, and she talked very early and read very early and all that stuff. So she was like, come again. And
she'd be saying hi to people and buying, come again. It was great.
It was super cute. We put them in they had the walkers back then that moved. And
Oh
we
yeah,
put
yeah.
them, and so we just had comics on the tables, and they could zoom back and forth underneath the tables. We had tricycles; they went up and down the aisles, um, and the
Yeah.
kids were great. But yeah, once I got enough kids, I couldn't really be in the store anymore. And he got laid off about the same time, so it worked out to
So Charlotte is born in 93.
Yep.
September 93, Jeremy is laid off from and
Yep.
right.
starts working
That
at
is
the
correct.
shop. 96, Ben is born. 98, Frida is born. I don't know if I got that
Yep.
name pronounced right.
That is correct.
Right.
So talk about that for a moment. I love this idea that, running a business is easier than raising kids. And in many ways,
Way
you're
easier.
absolutely right. You're
Well, you
absolutely
have
right.
to remember, in the midst of the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of discussions and interviews that we had before we ever got married, the
Yeah.
conversation of the
Right.
question came up: how many kids? If we get married
Right.
and we have kids, how many do you want to have? And the number 4 was what came up. So we ended up doing 4 kids.
So you
I
stopped
wanted
at 4.
4 from the time I was 12. So I came in going 4, and I think you said
I
at the
think I said 5.
4 or 5.
Yeah. And it worked out just fine. And
but-
and if it we would have had a 5th if we'd had the time. But by the time Frida came, she was already she was already in her late 30s, and it was like, let's not run the risk of congenital defects. But
Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
I just
and she was tired of it. That too.
no, I wanted 4, and I got my 4, but 3 started becoming really easy, and I kind of felt like maybe I don't want to go. We had incredible trouble getting pregnant. Some of it was diabetic related.
Yep.
That's about 10% of infertility comes from that. But anyway, we had a lot of trouble, and God, I guess, set it up where they were pretty much spaced 2.5 years apart, which was perfect because they really work out that well because they're old enough that you can kind of, but
And you only change it one set of diapers, hopefully, at a time.
No. Trust me. The day that we were done with diapers was one of the happiest days of my life.
I have no doubt at all.
But it was 10 years of diapers.
Yeah, it was 10 years.
Sarah is in long boxes saying come again. Did the rest of the kids, did they kind of grow up in the shop as well, or was this at this
Charlotte
point?
did, but
Okay.
not the rest.
Yeah, after Charlotte, a while, it started becoming a problem, mostly because I was breastfeeding. I couldn't do that with Sarah, and when breastfeeding is hard, and you can't get comfortable and all, and I felt like, look, the one thing we can give to our kids, I'm not going to be able, like, both my brothers were lawyers, and I felt like they had done really well and were going to make a lot of money, and I still wanted to send my kids to college. So I was like, okay, I can at least be there for them. And so I stayed home for a few years. Well, I'd bring them up, of course, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I wasn't in the store once, and he was there, and I had my other manager, so I didn't really need to be there for a few years, but I came back right after they were all in school or preschool or whatever.
So do they get? I know that you mentioned earlier your kids working, and then some employees are there. How many of your kids are still at the shop? Have they adopted the family business?
Sarah and Frida are working the store. Charlotte, Charlotte and I love each other to death, and we can't. We're oil and water. We cannot. we just can't work together. We've tried, and it just doesn't work, and so we don't. It's not a. That isn't a. That's just, we just don't work well together. So we don't.
But she's probably, of the girls, she's probably the best in business. She's very savvy, very good in stuff. But she said, I want to love my dad, so I'm not going to work with him. But she comes for the show. Like big. When we do events, she'll come and do that stuff. And she has some related kind of convention stuff that she does.
She makes Pokeballs with scenarios inside. There's that's one of the many things she also sews. She and her best friend do this together, but basically they have an Etsy shop with a bunch of stuff that they sell at conventions or through the Etsy shop. And she'll set up at the store when I'm having an event.
Yeah,
But she doesn't work the store as such.
that's fair.
And Ben worked the
He was probably
Ben
going to be the best. Yeah.
yeah. Ben was awesome.
He was really into it.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Ben for a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what there is to say. We still don't know 10 years later. We got woken up by the alarm company. He had graduated high school and was going to, it was a Sunday night, and he was going to start college the next day. And we got called by the alarm company, and that there was an unauthorized opening. And since I knew I had to get up at the crack of dawn on Monday, she went to the store to see what was going on, and we had a firearm in the store, and he had found it and killed himself in the back room.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry too. It's 10 years and it's still sorriness, but it's we don't know. He didn't leave. There was no note. There was no nothing. We have to figure it was the stress of going. He was not that happy in high school, and we knew that. But he didn't say, no, I don't want to go to school. So we went ahead and did the things to get him into college. And apparently the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know how else to say it.
He kind of said that he didn't want to do, and I said, well, fine, then you have to find some other way to earn money. But he didn't like that answer. And even his sister, Charlotte, had talked to him about, well, you can go do something else. It won't, you could say, you tell him, because she had gone to school and then she did really well at first and kind of goofed off or whatever did with her classes. So she didn't quite finish, but she had done several semesters and stuff. And she said, mom and dad didn't get mad at me about that, so you'd be fine. But I think to some degree it was a bunch of things go wrong, and some of them aren't really wrong. It's like maybe I said something about, oh, can you pick up the little pieces around the trash when you're taking the trash out? And they start to think, okay, that means, I'm being a problem for mom and dad too. But
Sure.
There was a bunch of other things that were, he felt like, he wasn't good looking, and he felt like, some other kind of little things that were frustrating to him. And yeah, it was hard because he was such a great guy. I mean, when I look at all the things, all the choices he made in his life, I thought he made really good choices, but he was very sensitive personally. I think I'm deep emotionally, but he was deeper. And I don't think he had that feeling of somebody really saw him for who he was, he didn't have, he had very close friends.
Still does.
Yeah.
To this day, the people that were close to him are still close to him now, 10 years later.
Right. Yeah. Several of them were musicians, and they've dedicated concerts to him and stuff like that. And it just, yeah. So, yeah. And we've had so many things, people coming back later, to say, like one girl we met at a clothing store or something like that, but, we didn't even know. She said something about, going to Pierce, and so Charlotte said, oh, did you know Benjamin? And she's like, oh no, I don't. And then she was like, wait, do you mean Benny? Or she called him by some other nickname.
Yeah.
But she was going, yeah, I know him. I was sitting on the stairs outside of lunch, and he came up to me and he said, why don't you come join us for lunch? And made part of the group. And he was doing stuff like that. We had so many people say stuff later about how he meant something to them, and he had his own set of customers, which was, they just, were devastated about things, and they did the sweetest things. This one guy who never really talked in the comic shop, he was kind of a, I'll look myself. You don't have to help me. thing, but he knew that Benjamin liked the anime stuff, and so he ordered river rocks from Japan for Benjamin because in Judaism you put rocks instead of flowers and stuff. And we were so touched at how many people came in and did stuff, and it was amazing. So it really, and that's the neat part about a comic store. I don't know that the other stores are like that, but for us, it's a village. We really we go to people's weddings, and we talk about their, if they're getting divorced or if they had trouble with
Sure.
their kids. We've brought comics to them in the hospital, or at their home if they
Sure.
can't get out. All sorts of.
She calls me the comic book bartender because I always check on people, and I know more about them than their wives do. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've met them, you've talked to them once a week for
Years.
decades. You're right.
Well,
Yeah.
he's also got such a memory. Like this one guy who come in like a year apart or whatever else, and he goes, "Do you have new glasses?" And he goes, "My wife hasn't even noticed that I've changed glasses." Like, you haven't seen me for a year, and it interesting stuff like that. But yeah, we really do connect with them, and it's really touched our hearts at how.
Again, that's part of the being the kind of store that I would want to shop at. I want to present that, or at least give people the opportunity to participate in that. They don't have to take me up on it. If they're like, leave me alone, I don't want to talk to anybody. Okay, we leave you alone. It's cool. You don't have to get talked to. It's part of being closer to people, shared experiences, shared comic books are, in my opinion, comic books are not, while you can enjoy the story yourself, it's always more fun when you can talk it over with somebody, when you can share that. Wow, that part where so and so did such and such, and
wasn't that clever? And
the shared experience just trumps anything else that's out there, because you have that. I'm reading this; it's a very personal reading it, but I can share it with other people and get excited by it at the same time. I mean, to this day, I still have people who come in the store and literally talk our ears off because they want to talk about their comic books and what they think is cool. And it's that, and we love it. That's what we're there for.
Yeah, we have to learn to work while we're listening, because it's like we won't get anything done if we just sit there and talk the whole time. But
it's I'm finding the most remarkable about this conversation is that you two have I would say, even, I mean, I'm going to step back and come at this a different direction. As someone who has spent most of my life at this point in comic shops or thinking about comic shops, I do see them as a place of community and a place of connection. And I don't think I've ever seen it quite embodied like I do see the two of you, where you're talking. I mean, Cecilia, we're talking about your shops in Houston, where you were treating all of these kids like family and bringing them in and taking care of their medical bills and doing Wednesday night dinners and what have you. And obviously, that sort of nurturing, out of that nurturing comes this sort of a whole generation of comic book, professionals and people who value that. You're talking about Jeremy and your memory for people and your sincere desire to connect with people and to discuss this thing that we both love. I think that there's something really beautiful about that, is that you both have seemed to have embodied that idea of comic shops as a place of connection, as a place of community. And I think that's really beautiful. And as a result of that, you also give so much, such honesty coming out of the both of you. And before we leave it, I do want to say thank you for your conversation about Ben.
You're welcome.
Because I do think that it was beautiful.
Anytime I get a chance to share about my son, I take it, no matter how choked up I get. It's actually, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I wouldn't dream of stopping you.
Thank you.
Okay. I do want to get into some nuts and bolts. We're at this
Okay.
almost a quarter. We're a quarter an hour away from 2, so we normally get these
Oh,
run
wow.
about 2 hours. But you know what? I'm having such a good time. You guys, let me know when you're. I'll try and keep a note when you start to
Right.
look a little tired. Let's talk about running a comic shop, because
Okay.
what I also see is two business professionals. So I see an accountant, I see a systems engineer, I see people who value the business itself. I know that Jeremy, you and I have had a conversation about we just went through a sales downturn in our industry, and I think I do have I'm very bullish about the fact that I think we're going to start seeing an upturn this year. Just based on what I'm seeing already, the kind of interest and excitement I'm seeing. Will you talk about when you see a downturn, what are the steps that you take, and how does that translate into what the customers experience?
Well, okay. Um, in our comic book store, we routinely see cyclical events that just even in good years or better years,
Yeah, there's
there's up there. It's a sine wave. You get good parts and you get bad parts. For example, right now, right this moment, at the end of August, heading into September, is one of the worst times for my store.
because everyone's going to school.
Everybody went back to school. They've
Spending
got
money.
bills to pay. They've got band uniforms. And as a result, in June, July, when I'm putting together my orders, now things are a little bit different now. This is something that I've started up as a practice for me. I don't if a publisher is FOCable, final order cutoff, for those people who don't know what that means,
Thank you.
I don't place an initial order of any kind anymore. I don't even
We used to.
think about it. I used
When-
to
when
until
did you-
about
when
a
did you
year,
make that
year and a half
shift?
ago.
Year and a half ago. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
somewhere around 18 months ago, I started that practice.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a waste of
I
time.
had been doing it for everyone except Marvel, DC, Image, the big guys, because there's so much seeming to do the initials and then having to do the FOCs again just got to be too much. I stopped doing that like 4 years ago, back about the same time that the DC broke away from Diamond is when I started going, okay, I'm just going to do FOCs now.
We have to save
but the-
time because there's so many publishers now.
There's so many distributors and there's so many publishers. My time, I'm the guy that
Finite.
ends up doing most of the ordering at the store. I talk it over with my employees and my
He
managers.
does.
I don't discount their opinion. I don't ignore what they. Matter of fact, half the time,
But it means that he has this number in mind, and if we say, "Oh yeah, it's really great," he might go up to here, and if we say, "Oh, it's terrible," he might go down to here. But it affects it, but it's not. He won't change it to what it is unless
I've managed
unless
so
it's
far.
anime.
Yes, unless it's anime. Yes. But the given the frequency of orders and multiplicity of sources to order from, I have to concentrate my time on the FOCs now. And that's, I literally, I mean, my initial order takes me about 2 hours because I just look for the stuff that's not FOCable and do that and skip everything else.
Blast through.
It's now that doesn't always work for everyone. I understand. Among other things, if you're running a, I have no doubt of any kind. One of the things to keep in mind is I have been for Comics Pro one of the people in the mentoring forum for up and coming people who are looking to open stores, people who have just opened stores, people who who are
He's done
dreaming
this
of
for
opening
like 20
stores.
years,
I've been doing that for a long time, and if you've got a small store, if you've got a beginning store, it's probably better to go ahead and do an initial, because you want to get the mindset for what you want to order down before you're faced with final ordering. For an established business, I mean, for me, if I know if it's a new Marvel title, I'm going to order this number. It almost doesn't matter who writes it, who's in it. If it's a new Marvel title it's their current trial balloon of the greatest thing ever in the history of everness, I know pretty much to the number what I'm going to order, unless there's some returnability is always something different.
Is it a multiplier?
I'm sorry?
Is that a multiplier?
We can go up. Yeah, we definitely go up.
I don't know about a multiplier. It depends.
It's an increment.
It's got to be, well, like perfect example this week. Vault's title this week is, I forget the name of it. I checked it in this morning. It's got something is the first word, and all the Vault people are yelling at their screens now, and I'm sorry about that. But Vault's got this program where they give you the comics. You just tell them how many you want.
Right.
And I'm not a big fan of killing trees for the sake of killing trees, just because it's returnable, just because it's free. Yay, I'll order, but no, I don't do that. But I did order way more than I normally would. And when I received the order today, I'm like, whoa, why are there so many? Oh, they're free. Yeah, that's why. But when there's no returnability involved, if my numbers, remember, I have an established subscription base. I've got a long time track record using my point of sale system. Thank you, Django. CSA, yes.
You're at CSA. Excellent.
Comic shop assistant. Django is the man.
For us Moby users.
Yes, for us ex-Moby users, for us reformed Moby users.
R.I.P.
Yes, it's still being used by a lot of people. Joe Field's still on it. For example.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got an established point of sale system with long time track record of things. But if you're just starting out your business, you order one. If you sell out, you reorder it. And if you don't, if you can't get any more, guess what? You made 100% profit. Yay! Move on.
Yeah, but for stores trying to do stuff, we will not tell a customer that, we won't, just because I have too many of something that didn't turn out to be as good, we won't say, oh, this is the best ever. We'll say,
no false advertising.
We don't do it. We want them to trust us. When we say that, we say, well, it's not for me, but a lot of people have picked it up. So, you have a way of saying it, but you don't go, I love this. And you don't ever say you hate it, because as soon as you say you hate
somebody
whatever,
else said it, somebody
the
comes in there loves it.
On the next aisle will be the biggest fan ever, and you will have lost them. And so it's like, no, it's not for me, but we give honest opinions, and that's why they pick certain ones of us to ask about stuff. Sure. But that's
they know who's going to give them the answer that the kind of answer they're looking for. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, so since you mentioned Django, he was very specific about wanting to talk about a few things.
Sure.
Let me find those in here.
Metal cabinets. I know that was one of them.
Metal filing cabinets.
Yeah. Well, I stole that. Okay. I didn't necessarily steal it, but it was a good 8-year project. I first saw Chuck Krasinski had, way back in the 80s, had these drawers with long boxes in them. It was a stack of 4, and you could open them up and go through them. And I thought that was the best thing ever, man. That was cool. Yeah. But they also cost like $2,000 for 4 boxes. Yeah. And at the time, my store is very back issue heavy. I have about 175,000 different back issues on the floor at any one time. Let's see here. If a long box holds 325 and each one of those units costs $2,000, I'm looking at an insane amount of money. Right. So I started casting about and testing out things, and the thing I came up with was lateral filing cabinets That
Okay.
You had to check them. Not every lateral filing cabinet will fit a half-size box.
Short box.
Short box.
And
right.
and the right size lateral filing cabinet, you can just drop a short box in on all 4 drawers.
And it works. It is perfect.
The customers love it. It helps the organization. That what the sneak surprise benefit of it that I never saw coming until after the fact. What's the biggest problem with going through people's back issue bins? Your hands get filthy because they're dirty. Dusty as hell.
Yeah.
My back issues don't get dusty because they're covered.
Huh.
The incessant rain of dust that happens in every comic book store.
Right.
Okay. It's there. You know, it doesn't settle on my back issues because they're all covered up. And it wasn't anything I had originally intended to do. It just was, And so anyway,
off the front panels.
And I took off the front. I take off the front of the doors so that we can use snap happies on the front of the boxes and see.
So you color. You
color.
can actually see comics on the front.
I've seen the people, and many people have taken my idea, and I give it away freely. Please,
sure,
use the comic book business is so full of lousy, not necessarily lousy, but unusable ideas. If I've got a usable idea, take it, please.
Steal it with both hands. Right.
A rising tide floats all boats.
Amen.
Absolutely, 100%. If everyone's got nice looking back issue bins, I love it. It's awesome. And like Brent Irwin over at Collected Comics here in town, he came up with, I don't know that he came up with, but he definitely took the idea and ran with it. And he's got contact paper that he's got printed up on so he's on the front of it fronts. He doesn't take the front of the drawers off. He's got contact paper that he's got printed up.
Yeah.
Nowadays on the internet, people do magnets and put them on there. And it's awesome. I'm thrilled to death that there's an entire Facebook user group that's just about comic book file cabinets. Seriously.
I believe it. Seriously. I believe it. All right. Well, we're going to credit you with that. That's going to be the Jeremy.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take
we
that.
kept
Sure.
looking at something, but most of it, if you built it, it was too big. It took up too much. But these metal were strong enough to hold the boxes, and then we can take out a whole box, which was one of the problems if you had the things with. Yeah, and so you didn't have to move the whole thing to get one thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, tell me about handling back issue overstock and purchasing, because you are a back issue store, and that is becoming more and more rare. I will say that, like I would say even most of the stores I've been to in the last 6 months, I can't think of one of them that I would think of as a back issue store. And when you ask them about back issues, it's really basically their unsold new issues.
Yes.
Right.
So,
but this,
please.
Okay. Yeah, it was part of the switching from Houston to Dallas, because in Dallas there weren't anybody with really long runs like there were in Houston. Mm-hmm. You know, you go to Houston, you're going to get a huge selection at most stores, but I didn't have that. And we actually brought 75 boxes of Silver Age because we couldn't really sell it in Houston. So when we started out, we decided we were going to switch to having everything. And we actually had to make a choice to change our methodology so that we said, okay, we're going to have one of everything on the outside, and we will replace that one rather than having 5 or 3 or whatever of them, that we replace that one. And it would mean that, even if we picked something that you would only misbuy on one copy. Now that's still bad, but it also limits the stuff because space is such a big deal in comics. And so
Gene Roddenberry, he had the right idea. Space is the final frontier.
That's very true. Okay, well, but so we're talking about 150 to 175,000 units. And you're talking about one each.
Yep.
How big is the storage area where you're keeping everything else? And how are you tracking the? I mean, we're talking about, I mean, are you scanning each of these? Are you
No.
writing each one of them down as you sell them?
Nope.
We scan.
Well, no, okay, now
Yeah,
we
we
scan
do.
them with the point of sale
Or
system.
CSA or
Well, okay,
Sure.
okay. When we went on Moby, we went on
Uh-huh.
Moby about 10 years ago. Moby
Okay.
was our first point of sale system. And it basically took us almost 3 years
to get everything
to
in.
put, and we put every single back issue into Moby with a barcode that we would internally generate if need be. Silver Age doesn't have barcodes.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff through even into the mid 80s didn't have usable barcodes. They had barcodes, but they were differently formatted. I've talked to Vince Laterio, who's Mr. Barcode, about this, and he remembers that stuff a whole lot better than I do. But there was an entirely different. This was pre 5-digit extension on the barcode. That didn't come about till the early 90s. So a lot of that stuff needed. We have to generate our own barcodes for them. And you have an item that's just for that. Now that's me. That's what I do. But Django's got a back issue module that he's got built into CSA that I don't use. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just because in the conversion over, I had two choices. I could either re-enter every single thing in my back issue categories into his back issue, or
system,
just
or
convert the
transpose all the data over,
which has its own problems, but we're working.
Sure,
but that's what we did. We just, everything has its own item.
So what did you do pre 10 years ago when you got the point of sale system? Were you writing everything down as you're selling it?
You got it. Wrote it down as I sold it.
Right, and
quite annoying. Yes,
back in the day, I had a big book which I hand wrote, and I had little grids for the, if you had a series, Amazing Spider-Man that had 130 whatever, I had a grid that had like 200 little boxes, and we we the ones we had, and the
and then at the end of the day,
somebody could just replace the grid if we needed to, or whatever it was. But we kept it.
I still have those.
I know, it's surprising that worked as well as it did, because computerization has its own problems, because you have to have somebody always working. That's what I do.
Maintaining the data. Yeah.
Is I'm maintaining data all the time.
So in terms of buying stuff, since that was at least the foundation of your initial question, when people bring in collections, I go through and I pick out the one. I don't. Let's be clear. I don't consider it cherry picking, which is. I think that's a dirty word in many ways. But I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, you're just cherry picking. No, I go through and I pick out. I buy the ones I don't have.
Sure.
And if you've got a Wolverine 2, and it's selling for $30, but I got 20 of those already, I don't really need to spend the money on another one.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you keep it. That's fine. And again, going back to the trying to be the store I want to shop at, if I know it's worth money and you know it's worth money, and I'm saying, no, I have enough of those, and you see me do that and hear me say that, you are much more likely to come back and sell me things again. Sure. One of the things I say constantly to people who are bringing me things to sell is, why would I rip you off? You'll never come back to my store, ever.
Right.
Why would I screw you over just to get a couple of bucks, when the whole goal of being in business is having you come back and shop at my store, sell me more stuff, feel confident in coming in and seeing me and knowing that what I do is at least relatively upfront. It's a business deal. If you're not happy with it and I'm not happy with it at the same time, it's not a good deal.
It needs to be a win-win.
It needs to be a win-win, or else somebody walks away feeling screwed.
Yeah.
And I don't want to screw over anybody. I want everyone to walk out of there feeling at least relatively happy. Maybe not ecstatic, okay, but at least relatively happy that you sold me stuff. I offered you a fair price, and we can both walk away happy. I make money on the other side. You turned your seemingly less worthwhile stuff into money. Isn't that the goal? I thought that was why you were here to sell me things.
Sure.
No, I'm not going to pay you $300 for a $300 book. That's just not going to happen.
Except sometimes the story of why they're selling, he has paid.
I'm a sucker.
Much.
I am. I'm a sucker. I have a soft heart. I have no problem if I need to. I do.
We had a customer come in and he brought in his, the collection, and Jeremy was right away. He was a regular, and he said, "These are your favorites. What's going on?" And why? And he goes, "No, I need to sell them. I need to take care of rent or whatever." So magically, the amount we paid for that was the amount he needed. But it he gave him dignity and whatever else for a bad situation, and he's super honest with his he'll say, "Look, it's this much, and it'll retail for that, but it's going to take us a while to sell it. It's going to, he'll give the reasons why we're not offering a higher amount."
Yeah.
But they know straight up. And we've had several times where he gave that deal and he's like, a year from now, you want to come back? I'm still willing to pay that amount. I'm not giving you a dump,
It's not a one-time conversation. I'm willing to do that.
It's that honest. So.
But that's how I handle buying back issues. Is and it's all part of reading the tea leaves.
Yeah.
You have to know. You have to at least, going back to, again, I hate to carp on the same thing over and over again, but it's all about having a relationship with your customers and not having and not being adversaries with your customers.
Sure.
And it was different in the beginning because we had so many people selling down in Houston. You could pay pennies for, many long boxes.
Yeah.
It just was.
It was a different world back then too.
And you had to say, "Look, this is what I can do." And they wanted to get rid of them. So there was a lot of supply.
And I still have the inevitable. This happens so often. I want this many comics. I've got 12 long boxes. Yeah, I know. I want this many. I'll give you $50, whatever number it is. And they go, "Okay, just keep the rest." What? No,
we don't want to keep the rest. We don't want that.
But that happens. So
do you have a storage unit? Do you have a storage area?
We do. We don't want to have a storage unit.
It's almost impossible to have a back issue store without some kind of storage unit.
Well, I would say it's logistically impossible to have a back issue selection like you have one per out, still be in business and not have some sort of massive storage, right?
It's really not that large. It's really not. And I don't have that much in it, to be 100% honest.
Yeah.
I donate tons of comics to pretty much any library or school that wants a comic. I will. Yep. And all over the country. I like. Shoot, I had somebody from North Carolina today send me $20 so I could send them a box of comics, and they were just over the moon. And I said, "Anytime, you just tell me, I'll send you a box of comics, no problem." And I probably in the last 10 years, I've given, I've done that. I don't know, 200, 300 times. Little schools all over the country that want comics for their libraries and that kind of stuff. I don't care. Tell me. As long as you pay me $20 to ship you a box, you're good.
And then the Labor Day sale, we usually have a very cheap price.
Yeah, I have a sidewalk sale every Labor Day where I put out clear out the storage unit. Yay! It never gets
a quarter. It's 50 cents, whatever, and they could take however many they want.
This has been wonderful. I realize now I'm going through the list of questions that I have about kind of mechanics of running a shop, and I realize you've answered the thing that is really run through all of your answers is those two pieces. It's this is the comic shop I want to
Yeah.
shop at,
Yep.
and how do I connect with this person? That seems to be the guiding principle of everything you're doing, and I think that's not only commendable, but it makes it difficult to come up with new questions to ask you because I already know the answer.
Okay, well, there you go.
I still have the memory of going to Third Planet as a customer, and
Yeah.
I
Down in
I
Houston.
I came up to the register with my comics. I'm all ready to give them money, and the guy sitting there reading a comic, and I'm like, but he did not stop until he finished reading to wait on me.
Yep.
And that was my kind of that's the way when I went into a lot of shops, they didn't help me, they didn't show me stuff, they didn't tell me about stuff. And that was not, Carbonaro had told me all sorts of stuff which I loved, and we just kept doing that. And yeah, I did not want that to ever happen with our store. And
And I believe it
just
never has.
a little thing about Carbonaro, because you said we were kind of in business together, but it wasn't like that. He was doing it as a white knight. I mean, he got some money, but he would actually sell stuff from his own collection to help out the store, if he thought we were too low on money or whatever else. And when time came that he felt like we could handle it, he just walked away. I mean, and he and I were friends forever. He used to send me jokes and stuff on the internet when we finally, started doing stuff. But yeah, he was that kind of guy. So.
And what a fascinating guy he was. We could probably spend the next 2 hours just
Yeah.
talking about
indeed.
him and his
was quite
career.
the guy.
Yeah. But I am conscious of the fact that both, I've taken up a couple hours of your time, and my family has finally come back from the evening. So I do have a couple questions I'm starting to use to kind of wrap things up, and it's an interesting way of like kind of getting a feeling, like a core sample from everyone. You've now been in comics together. Together, you guys, you're probably reaching like 100 years of experience, all told. You've seen ups and downs. You've seen where this industry has gone. You've seen the cycles, and you prepare for them, even before they seem to have arrived. What do you think is the biggest risk facing direct market comic shops, the comics industry, however you want to parse that out? What do you think is the biggest risk that we're facing now?
You want to answer that, or you want me? You're not involved on the day-to-day usually. You want me to get that? I'm good with it.
I kind of want to know. I want to know. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll say something if you want. Okay. In my opinion, the biggest threat to the comic book business, undoubtedly, is gigantic corporations who have no idea how to deal with, handle, process, manipulate, whatever word you come up with, the various IPs that the comic book business has presented to them. And I think the perfect example of that right now, DC, that AOL eviscerated DC as a company. And I am not dialed into who is still working at DC, but it sure seems like that a lot of the editorial choices that DC's making are not particularly well informed and not particularly workable. Now, they've got Scott Snyder's absolute, an all in. Okay, I'm willing to roll with it and see where it goes. But Marvel, for example, Marvel's latest initiative of, the back page, if you want to see the last page of the comic, you've got to scan a QR code and go to their website. Oh, you need to have their reader and you need to be registered. And of course, they'll harvest all your information and try and sell you stuff. That seems particularly predatory. And yep, that's not a friendly word, and I don't think it's a friendly course of action for them. But I think that's all part and parcel of giant corporations attempting to turn what is the tiniest of business. I can still remember years ago, Buddy Saunders here in town. He came back he came back from C2E2, and he said, "Yeah, I walked into C2E2, and I'm standing there in the entranceway, and right in front of me, there's 15, 20 different businesses that all gross more than $1 billion." And this was back in the days when comic books were, if they were 250 million, that was a lot. And here we are. It's we're the tail of the dog. The tail wags the dog, particularly nowadays. For the last 10, 12, 15 years in the movie business, Marvel's IPs have absolutely wagged the tail of that has wagged the dog. And now that things are less successful, less lucrative, apparently, for Marvel at any rate, and DC, I don't know, DC can't seem to make a movie of their own characters to save their lives. We could talk about that for a long time too.
Sure.
But I think that the strip mining that large corporations do with things that they know have internal value is the most probable cause of a long-term decline in comic book sales.
Okay. All right. Cecilia?
Well, he's right. He's right about the big companies, because it used to be so much more personal, especially with DC. But when they moved out to the
West Coast,
West Coast, it's like they were not in touch anymore. And there was that whole period of time where the movies didn't have any writers, and then they started stealing comic stories, which they were picking out the really good stuff, and that worked for a period of time. So yeah, I do think that's probably the biggest threat, is that you get whoever's in charge, they make up their notions, and Marvel has done this for years, because they're always like, looking at, they've got to have the right, when you're no longer personally owned, then it starts where they're just looking for the money, and they don't know what's going to make money in the stuff. They're not, because they're not inside the business. They don't know what people are looking for. It's like when they tried to make women's comics, and they kept doing it wrong for 15 years before you had women writer and artists.
It is interesting, though, thinking about the editorial of those two companies. DC, Jeffries, she's been there for a while, but she's kind of come up to that position. But in seemingly, like most of the rest of their editorial staff is pretty fresh, pretty green, seemingly.
Mm-hmm.
But at Marvel, like those editors, those guys in charge have been there for decades. So
Right.
they do know that material, and they do know what has succeeded in the past. So it is interesting that you make that comparison.
They do, but I mean, Marvel has always been really uptight about relating to their direct customers are the shops, right?
Sure.
We're the ones who are buying the stuff to disseminate it. I mean, unless they go all digital or whatever, but even when I was 18, John Carbonaro took me to New York, and we went to Marvel and DC while we were in New York, because he knew them. He had grown up there. And when we went into Marvel, it was like, you can go see the exact person who you said you were coming to see, and don't look anywhere. And, I was 18. I mean, this was a long time ago. And when the things happen, I know I must have been older than that, 20. But anyway, when it came the time for going to DC, everybody was so friendly. They were all inviting you into the offices. They talked to you, and we knew so many of the people who worked there. forever. And it was a completely different feel, that they really connected and whatever else. And then they moved out, and it hasn't been the same since.
Nope, hadn't been the same since.
So, I mean, we were appreciating people like Boom or whatever that, were more, connective and trying to do.
So
that.
those risks being said, and those are a very high level risks, right? Those are things that, well beyond anything I can do, anything you can do, anything most of the people that we know can do about them. How do you mitigate, because you do such a good job of mitigating potential downsides, from having conversations in the past about the mechanics of how you look at that. How do you mitigate that risk of that potential worst thing in your shop?
I don't know that I can. If I mean, I've certainly seen enough about this over the years. If Marvel or DC decide to stop publishing comics, I'll take my back issue selection and go online and sell it there.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate the idea. But short of reinventing what I do and how I do it, that is coming up with something else that my product line would fit into, whether it's models or whatever that also would go along with old comic books. I feel that if you don't have an overriding reason to have people come into your store on a weekly basis, new comic
books, periodical helps.
The periodicalness of comic books, and the fact that you have the repeat customers because they're tied into buying monthly stuff. If that goes away, I'm not saying it's impossible. You still have the collected editions. I'd still have the back issues, but I just don't know, because the dependability
of that weekly,
even though it's all over the map. I've got guys who come in once every 2 months, and once every 3 months, and once every 2 weeks, and 3 times a week, and the whole 9 yards. So the dependability conversation is not everybody comes in like a machine every 7 days. No. But when you have a large enough sample size, the variations in dependability smooth out enough that you end up with a suitable amount of income that you can depend upon on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, but the pandemic was a perfect example of this super danger spot, because we were literally closed down. I mean, we couldn't open the doors for 7 weeks.
5 weeks. It was only 5 weeks here in Texas. Now, I'm well aware that people in California and Oregon are like, 5 weeks. What's that? I know. I felt for y'all. I really did, guys. I really did.
We could still do mail out, and we adjusted to. I mean, and our customers, like a village, came up with spotlights and cameras and stuff so that we could do online sales of back issues, and we were able to survive because we have such a selection of trade paperbacks, of back issues, and whatever else. So I thought we would do okay, because we had, people really wanted to support us, and so that worked. And like he said, we could sell online, but it's more fun to have the store.
Absolutely. That's the customers. What gets me out of bed in the morning, what makes me excited, is not going through this week's shipment. It's seeing the customers. It's interacting with them. Yeah. That's why I love what I do. It's the people. It's not the things. It's the people.
Yeah.
I usually follow up that what is the biggest risk question with a what gives you hope, but I think you just answered that. So
yeah, and the number one thing I knew you were going to ask me that, and the thing that I remember most distinctly is after the first Iron Man movie, okay, which was what 12 years ago, whatever it was, okay, after the first Iron Man movie, and the first parent brought their kid in decked out in Iron Man stuff. who, the 5-year-old who saw the movie and he would, Tony Stark was the bomb, man. He wanted to grow up and be Iron Man.
Sure.
I knew at that point, if they could just keep making movies like that would get the kids interested and excited in just the concept of comic books and comic book characters, that my ability to sell them product would never go away. Yeah, that gives me hope.
It's not just comic books. I mean, to me, it's heroes. It's sometimes history or artwork or whatever else. There is so much to comic books that it's an amazing, if you want to get escapism from whatever, they have that too. There's so much there. And I watched people who really couldn't read very well, but because the comics had pictures, they learned how to read it. It's written on college reading levels. I mean, it elevated their vocabulary and their whatever. So we watched people improve because of that. And I thought it was cool that you could write in and get printed on the stuff. They don't do that really now, but
yeah,
letter columns. Yeah,
but you can still influence. I know there were several little kids who've gotten their character in or whatever else because they kept writing into them and suggesting things. And you had that Axe, whatever. Anyway.
Axe Cop. Yeah, that was cool too.
That they did stuff.
That was awesome. I wish that kid would come back and write more comics.
Yeah,
please do that. I love that stuff, man. That was so much fun to read.
Yeah, there's so much to it. But the heroism, it's like I watch all the Ukrainian stuff because I realize I love heroes. And I see real heroism in the stuff they're doing over there. And so, it's like, I've dedicated my life to heroes, and we get a lot of cops and firemen and doctors and whatever else, which I think that's what appeals to them too.
Well, thank you so much for
sure.
that life well spent, and thank you. Yeah.
Hang on. There's one thing I have to do.
What?
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yes. She said I never kiss her enough.
Oh. I thought for a second we were gonna pull a bowler hat out from under behind you, but no,
not for that.
Not until the fall. It's too early. Still.
Thank you guys so much. This has been a genuine pleasure. I cannot thank you enough. How can our audience, who the 5 or 6 people who've gone all the way through this interview, how can they find you?
All of my children will watch it all the way through the rest.
They'll be like that.
So Titan Comics. I'm at 3128 Forest Lane, Suite 250, Dallas, Texas 75234, 214-350-4420. And
is our phone number.
Yeah, is our phone number. and TitanComics.com, which I still don't understand why Titan Comics, the publisher, hasn't tried to find the site for me.
We took it.
I get emails for them all the time.
Nick, if you're watching this, you gotta come in, man. He's willing to listen to a reasonable offer. Anyway,
absolutely. But in the meantime, I have TitanComics.com. I know the guy who ran Titan Comics in Atlanta back when I first back when the internet was relatively new, and he found out I had TitanComics.com. I was like, it's like, sorry, I got there first. What can I say?
We had at Brave New World, we had the same problem with people in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been.
Go be with your family. You should do that, and we'll do that too. Don't worry.
Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.